Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today for what I know will be an extremely valuable session. My name is Haider Ali. You can probably see it at the next to my picture. I'll be your host for today's webinar, and we're delighted to have such a strong turnout. It shows just how important these upcoming ISO changes are for organizations across every sector. Feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining from today. It's always inspiring to see the breadth of organizations working to improve their quality and environmental management systems. And as Greg already alluded to, we will have Q&A at the end, so please jot down the questions as they come to mind. Right, so at Bureau Veritas, our mission is simple: to help organizations strengthen trust, clarity, and confidence in the way they operate. Standards like ISO 9001 and 14001 sit right at the heart of that, ensuring consistent quality, stronger environmental performance, and smoother, more resilient operations. Now, these upcoming changes have created a lot of questions across industries. What's new? What will auditors expect? And what should organizations start preparing for? So today's session is designed to give you clarity on exactly that in a straightforward and practical way. And I'm delighted to be joined by our technical expert who will take you through what's changing, why it matters, and the steps you can begin taking to stay aligned and ready. So thank you again for being here. We hope the session gives you real value and practical insights. With that, I'll hand it over to Greg Elwell, who will guide you through the technical details. And Greg, over to you.
Thank you ever so much, Haida. And yeah, my name's Greg, Greg Elwell. I've been with Bureau Veritas now for just over 14 years, primarily in a technical role as well. So this is what I'm used to dealing with. I've been around for that long that I took organizations through training and transition training for the 2015 revisions. So the first thing we're going to talk about are really the review cycles of the standards, how they come about, what the evolution has been. And first looking at 9001, as we can see, this is a well-established standard. Back in 1987, the first edition was released, and it's gone through some changes which have subsequently changed, because in 1994, it started to include preventive action, which changed in 2015 to become actions to address risks and opportunities. So it's a continual evolution. I got involved with the management system standards back in 2000, well, just before actually, where we started talking about a process approach. In 2008, there was an update to enhance compatibility with 14001. And then in 2015, this is where the first, in a way, standardization of the management system standards happened. We had the backbone of what's referred to as Annex SL, and that still exists for all of the ISO management system standards. And this 6th edition, which is under review, as we'll see in the details, it's now embedding the consideration of climate change. There's the introduction of some quality culture, ethical behavior, consideration of remote and hybrid working as well, with an emphasis, much greater emphasis on risks and opportunities as being one of the backbones of the standard itself. When we look at 14001, again, a pretty well established standard. It was considered 1993, first published in 1996, and I was involved again myself at those early days implementing it for the organization I worked for. As we've seen, 2004, looking for alignment with OSAS 18001 as well, because that was the standard which ran alongside a lot of HSE management systems that we saw. And again, the same changes in 2015, with Annex SL. And this fourth edition is really looking at an organization's commitment against the worldwide environmental structure we're looking at. We've got a commitment to sustainable development, talking about corporate climate resilience, in environmental accountability, to give your stakeholders confidence, those interested parties. Now, why has there been another revision of the standards? It's really about maintaining relevance with the market, remaining current and against those global shifts that we see. The whole idea is that the standards continue to add value. They align with the users, the end users of the products and services which you're supplying, and to clarify and strengthen some of the requirements within the standards as well. In terms of when the editions are going to be published, ISO 14001 comes first. That's at a final draft international standard status at the minute. We don't expect many changes, but there will be refinements potentially. And following that, there will be ISO 9001 expected to be at the end of September this year. What I'm going to talk about now are the main changes, the potential impacts on your management system. And this will be blended in terms of 9001 and 14001 in some topic areas. Then we'll go and we'll look into a bit more depth around the clause wording changes and what that might mean for you as an organization and for your management system. So a lot of organizations are faced with an increasing view of sustainability in global topics. And it's about the integration of those themes into the requirements. We've seen climate change for both standards in an Amendment 1 from 2024, where climate change would be considered. This applies to your context, your interested parties, potentially to your objectives as well. But 14001 expands this a little and it talks about biodiversity, the circular economy from an environmental point of view as well, in terms of environmental sustainability, aligning to your strategic business objectives as well. More holistic view as we now see in the marketplace as well. There are improvements in risk management. 9001 already brings a robust approach to this area, but there's been some clarification about what you as an organization are required to do. And 14001 itself actually looks at the analysis of environmental risks and opportunities across the board, with that long-term, that life cycle perspective. And companies are going to have to look at that strategically for their resilience, not just to do with the compliance objectives, those legal and other requirements. This links into, as we've mentioned, the life cycle approach. And it's mandatory to consider those environmental impacts throughout the whole product life cycle. This is from raw material, production to disposal. And it's that step forward. Probably the closest consideration that we already are all generally aware of is in the automotive industry, where there's that end of life consideration for the cars and it's flowing back down through that supply chain. Not just those direct impacts from your supply chain. It's about looking at the environmental responsibility throughout the life cycle. Now, one thing that we're all faced with, we're all working through at the minute as well, are digital tools. And the standards are reflecting that move and really encouraging the use of these. So it might be through data collection and analysis. It might be actually your environmental indicators, some real-time monitoring of them rather than just those spot checks. We've got AI coming to the fore, hopefully not in the bad ways that we've seen in some of the movies, but hoping to help to consolidate information for us to summarize these things. These tools are going to be integrated into the management system and may even support the management system itself, how we deliver that information, how we communicate within the organization. This approach hopefully leads to some strong engagement. There's within 9001, there's an expansion into the culture requirements, the ethics of the organization, how we engage, how we make sure for the well-being of our personnel, that focus on the people. And it's about the principles then of the management system. ISO 14001 talks about more transparent communication. And especially within stakeholders, if we're looking more around the life cycle assessment, then there will be some clearer and more accessible environmental reporting across the piece with, we hope, verifiable and reliable data. And just as an aside there, we actually, in Bureau Veritas, we do offer verification of environmental reporting, be it your CSR reporting. And given that I'm in certification, it's a completely different division, different people, different legal entity, so that we manage our ethical approach of being impartial and independent. And if you do choose to follow that route, be it with us or someone else, then it does give that greater transparency. And something that you can share with your public. A lot of organizations make their CSR reports, their ESG reports, public on their website as well. This slide, I must admit, takes me back, given I'm a little bit older, and makes me think of the early 90s film Cliffhanger, or maybe a bit more recent, the Mission Impossible series. But it's, as an organization, it's about building your own resilience and adaptability. It's not quite full-blown business continuity, which I know I have some clients on here who we certify for business continuity, but 9001 talks about consideration of those risks of disruption and how you're going to continue to supply during and after the disruptions. It's not a requirement within the standard, it's just a note. So it shows how the management system standards are being brought together, different themes being added as well. Now we're talking about the changes we are aware of at the minute. There are also requirements that may yet change. Now, given that 9001 is at the draft international standard stage, everything's open for change. So this is quite a big long list. I don't expect, or we as a certification body don't expect there to be sweeping changes beyond what we're going to talk about. We're further down the road with the 14001 standard, so we have a good idea. And you'll see why we can't make promises necessarily. Now, looking at the clause areas that have changed, then let's have a little look at a comparison between 2015 as it stood and 2026. On here, what you'll see is some areas highlighted in blue on the 2026 standard. And we see some of those, what I refer to as power words within the standard. The organisation shall. And that means that you have to demonstrate something for your certification. Shall determine whether climate change is a relevant issue. And I'll stress relevant, as we'll see in other areas as well. And talks about asking questions rather than issues at this stage, because it's you exploring your own context, asking questions around you. What could be relevant with your product and service from a climate change point of view? We're not talking as yet the life cycle assessment that we have within 14,001, but there's some consideration there. And you'll see in note 3, we've got a mention of the organization's strategic direction and resources now. Those have been added in. Now for 14,001, similar changes we see within the context area, but we talked about that broader perspective. And these issues shall include environmental conditions being affected by the organisation or those capable of affecting your organisation. And we've calling out here pollution, natural resources, climate change, again, biodiversity, or ecosystem health. Now, you may be close to an area of specific scientific interest, to green belts, to some of your neighbours and how you might interact with them in terms of your environmental impacts and their receptors. So that's a consideration to build upon. Okay. Now, interested parties. One thing that we've seen with the 2015 revision is that some organisations go to town. Oh, they could be interested. They might be interested. Oh, I've heard about this. We'll add that to the list. Let's have a little look. And it becomes somewhat of a behemoth. What you'll see in the 2026 version is that it's about the relevance and the relevance of those interested parties, their relevant requirements, and it's up to you as to which of those requirements are going to be addressed within your management system. It's your approach, and that's why we see so many differences across organizations. Again, the note saying relevant stakeholders may have requirements related to climate change, again, from Amendment 1 2024 being further embedded. What this could mean for you and for us as a certification body is that if you have identified an interested party, we may question more about the relevance of that for your organisation and for your own activities. And it's an opportunity for you to slim these down as well to make it a bit more manageable. In relation to the policy, again, there's another power word used here, must. The quality quality politics, no, not necessarily. The quality policy must be implemented and maintained and take into account the context and your own strategic direction. So that then further embeds the relevance. One thing that I spoke about back in 2015 was the McDonald's test for a policy, which is if you were to present a policy to an auditor and we were to replace your organization's name with McDonald's, did it read right? Did it make sense? And if it did, then actually it didn't meet the requirements of 521A in being appropriate. But this comment further embeds that must take into account the context. Risks, opportunities. What's been seen in the past is that risks and opportunities are very much intertwined. It may not be the case though, because it might not be a risk that you're faced with. There may just be an opportunity out there, diversification in relation to your strategic direction. What's been built compared to the 2015 version is about establishing processes to determine, analyze, and evaluate risks. We're not necessarily talking about a risk assessment process as you may have if you're doing your health and safety risk assessments, but that's an approach. Um, ISO 31000 talks about risk management. There are approaches within that standard that you may wish to consider. It's not something that's certified against, it's just guidelines for risk management. And the whole idea here is you being able to provide conforming products and services on an ongoing and consistent basis. And the note there refers to what we've spoken about before, continuity in the event of a disruption to operations, be it in the supply chain or for yourselves. Mentioned before about the blending of risks and opportunities, because point A on 612 in 2015 talks about risks and opportunities. You'll notice here 2026 is just talking about risk. And that's because, and again, same for 14,001, it's been separated out. Again, process, again, conforming products, and should plan actions to address these opportunities. It's worthwhile. And integrate those actions into the management system. Evaluate the effectiveness of the actions. That's key. Oh, there's a great opportunity. We're going to do this about it. Did it work? Did it not? Has it brought benefit? There's always something learning from that. Okay. From an environmental point of view, very similar in terms of risks and opportunities. Planning action, there's just a bit of a change in the structure. We've talked about environmental aspects and the life cycle perspective. This is where it sits in the standard, and it talks about acquisition of raw materials through to final disposal. What you'll also see within 14,001 is the new clause 6.3, planning of changes. That was already in the previous version of 9001, but it's been called out now for the environmental management system. But it's not just for the management system. It actually applies to the impacts, potential impacts of your environmental aspects and what conditions could be impacted. So that's, again, making the standard a little bit broader, a little bit more holistic. We talked a little bit about the way that we've changed in terms of our operations, how we work now, and the standards have been updated to reflect that. We've got highlighted in blue as applicable infrastructure for remote and hybrid work. We don't necessarily want, as an organization, we've had that reflection of culture, of people. We don't want our people to be stuck in a situation whereby, yes, they are working from home. We want to look after our people and make sure that they're well provisioned. For example, for myself, I currently have my laptop on a stand here. I have the monitor that I'm sharing with you to the right, and it's at a decent height. So hopefully my posture is not impacted, been through my DSE, and it covers everything from an organizational point of view that we need to for that infrastructure. And we spoke about the environment for the operation of the processes. These are just notes which are added, but they're things for consideration. And it could be technological, use of emerging technologies, AI, the different software approaches for management systems that we see. So that consideration, and also cultural. Your own organization will have a a quality culture that's appropriate for your needs, and ethical behavior. Now, this is something that we as a certification body have to be independent. There's a big focus in the accreditation standards for us on ethics, and it's again something that's being blended into other management system standards, so the ethical approaches. A couple of minor changes that we see within ISO 14001 in relation to the operational areas. It's about the clarification around outsourced processes, expanding some requirements to achieve your intended outcomes of your management system. And the guidance we expect to be modified. So that's where there's an annex to the standard that provides guidance around each of the areas. One thing which has been added here, and I mentioned other areas that might change for 9001, we expect these exact changes as well. Internal audits, defining some objectives for each audit. What do you want to get out of it? It's not necessarily just compliance to the standard. It could be a spot check following an issue, and you're going around to different areas in your management system, in your organization. The management review now, all inputs are required versus considered, and you'll have more information about that. There may even be some software data gathering, as we've spoken about before. As happens with standards, I've mentioned about power words before in the standards. I've mentioned that there are themes within the standards. What we've moved from in terms of documents and records has further developed. So rather than maintaining documented information, the phrase used now is shall be made available as documented information, rather than retaining evidence. Documented information is evidence. Now there's documented information shall be available as evidence of. Some of the questions during the development of the standard were available to whom? Anyone? Well, again, that annex clarifies available means that you as an organization can get hold of it, can use it, or can provide it. And as we say, available to interested parties. Then interested parties can come to you and ask, may acquire, for example, the scope and policy from yourselves as an organization. It may well be that you make it available on your website. So there's all different ways here of how that can be done. As I say, just a change in terminology again to bring further clarification. So that wraps up the changes that we see within the standard. And now we'll talk about the next steps and what is incumbent upon yourselves and ourselves as a certification body. I'm going to share a couple of pictures here about the next steps. Hopefully this will work for people. I'm going to quickly switch between both slides just because they're the same picture in slightly different colors, and the only difference are the timelines. The time scales stay the same. I mentioned earlier that the forecast for ISO 9001 to be published is September 2026. And you can see here where the blocks are sitting as a picture. Here, the timelines for 14001. The only difference is that the forecast is March 2026 for when ISO 14001 becomes active. At that point, it's published. It's available to us as a certification body, to you as a client. And then, because everything's finalized, things can start happening. As a certification body, we can start to train our auditors on the transition requirements. We ourselves, as a certification body, need to update our accreditation to that version of the standard. For yourselves, as organizations, maybe a little bit behind where we are because we'll, for example, have need to update the training material, then you can start your training. We can also have that lead auditor training accreditation that we deliver. While all of this is happening, you can continue to maintain your current management system and maintain the certification against the 2015 version to a point. One thing that does happen is a year after the standard is published, then we as a certification body cannot, a year and a day afterwards, issue a new certificate to the previous version of the standard. So that point for any organizations who are looking to seek certification who are on here, bear that in mind. We can certainly certify you in the meantime, and then there will be a transition to the new version of the standard. It all depends on your state of readiness and when you're looking to do this. As you'll see, the offer of new 2026 certification is expected to be from the start of 2027 because we have to manage our own accreditation, make sure our auditors are trained up. And then we carry on at the point 3 years from the date of the publishing of the standard, then the old version of the standard ceases to be active and it expires. We unfortunately saw a bit of a bow wave with the last transition because organizations, a fair few left it until the last minute. So I'd caution against that. And as we've seen, the changes aren't as sweeping as they were previously. So that's our 14,001 picture, and the 9,001 picture, 6 months longer. So you may look at it in a way that actually I've got 6 months to work on 14,001, then I can start the work on 9,001. You may well have an integrated management system and you start to make your changes and then finalize them when 9,001 is published. Entirely up to you, but there's no panic. You do have time and we'll support you on that journey as well. And now it's over to your questions that have been asked as I've been presenting and that we've had in prior to this webinar as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That was really insightful, and I know I did learn from that. Excuse me. I'll start with one of the questions we previously had. How will these changes affect our existing documentation?
So maybe not hugely. From my perspective, I think the way that I view the previous version of the standard, an awful lot of this was intended. If your management system is a little bit more mature, then you may have already been on this journey and it might be a tweak. We talk about the policy, including context and a link to your strategic direction, then that may already be there. We talk about documentation being made available as a change in terminology. I don't think that's going to change much. The separation of risks and opportunities, It doesn't mean that you have to separate your risks and opportunities. It's just that the requirements apply equally and you need to demonstrate what you're doing there. So, in essence, I don't think hugely. We'll just need to see as we go.
Okay. And another question we had was, how long do we have to upgrade to the new version of the standard? But I think we've kind of covered that. Would you say so?
Hopefully, yes.
Okay.
It's, as I say, 3 years from the date that the standard's published to actually upgrade to that version, to transition to that version.
Thanks. So we have a question from Felicity, and we had a similar question before the presentation as well. Changing from 2015 to 2026 certification, is there an extra cost or can it be done during a normal recertification audit?
Um, this time round, the IAF, who are the International Accreditation Forum, have set guidelines that there should be no additional time required. So there won't be any additional cost. Yes, you can absolutely do it at a recertification. You can even do it at a surveillance audit, I would expect. Now, I can't promise anything yet because it's not been set out, but that's the way things were done before. Um, Nothing's mandatory. However, if you wish, I've lost the word for that, begins with a optionally, yes. You can actually have a gap analysis from us if you wish. You can have a pre-audit, or if you wish, let's say there's some kind of deep dive audit you want on a transition focus, especially given the considerations, although it's only notes around the culture of the organization, you may wish us to deep dive in some of those areas and have a focus on them.
And a follow-up from that then is, how will the changes impact on surveillance audits?
I can't I can't confirm at the minute. I would expect that there won't be much of an impact and that we will be able to transition during a surveillance audit.
And then what areas of our QMS/EMS will require the most updates? I know we did mention a few specific clauses.
Yeah, it's difficult to say because as we see, we certify organizations from 3 people distributing parts to um, 80,000 people across the globe delivering IT services or the like. So very, very different. And it just depends on your own management system. As I say, the changes aren't sweeping. There will be a bit of a requirement around how you flush through these changes in your management system, but it's your management system. So I can't give a definitive answer, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Greg. We have a question from Amy. Could you clarify the time frame in which businesses can no longer obtain the old version of the standards?
Yeah, so new certification to the old version, although it's not yet old, is a year from the date of publication. If on the 15th of March this year, ISO 14001:2026 is published, then that will mean that on the 14th of March 2027, you could gain, if a decision was made by then, an independent decision was made by then you could gain certification to the old version of the standard. But if the decision came to be made on the 17th of March 2027, it wouldn't be valid certification. It's a very black and white deadline there.
Okay. And Ivan has a follow-up to that. It was stated on the slides that Bureau Veritas will not issue new ISO 14001:2015 certificates after March 2027 based on the expected timelines. However, will BV update the existing ISO 14001 certificates after March 2027 in case any changes are required? Example, scope changes or changes to the site list, address changes, site closures, etc.
Uh, Going back from memory, yes. We'll still do the extensions or the changes before there's a transition. So yeah, as someone with more wild hair than myself once said, the only constant is change. So yeah, we'll be able to apply those changes up until the deadline. So.
Thank you. And then it's how should we prepare staff for the transition? I think that is a very interesting one.
Um, a couple of ways, really. I think really what you should do when we've got it set up is send absolutely all of your employees on a Bureau Veritas lead auditor course, because that would be brilliant. No, no, not necessarily. The the presentation that we've got here, this webinar is recorded, and you'll receive a link to that. I'm going to especially share it with any employees, please, who are kind of like talent agents on the side. I'm still waiting for that big break in Hollywood, so that will be appreciated. But yeah, apparently it's going to be on YouTube as well. I might be famous. I hear people earn money on YouTube. That'd be great. So that's one way. Another way is keep in touch with us. There will be information available on our website. I think there's a QR code shortly that you'll be able to register your interest for, and those will be updated.
Brilliant. Thank you, Greg. And then are there tools, templates, or checklists available?
So not just yet. They're in development. We can't finalize them until the standard has actually been published. We don't want to lead you down kind of rat's alley so that you, oh yes, it's going to be this way, and it's not necessarily. Yeah, they will be available. Again, keep in touch. If you wish for a follow-up, let us know and we'll let you know when those are released.
And the last one, do we need to update our environmental policy or quality objectives? That's
So, I mean, interchangeable, whether it's quality environmental. The policy, maybe, because we've spoken about, as I say, the link to strategic direction to context. The objectives, quite possibly. Given the maybe different way, the stronger process for risks and opportunities, those themselves become an objective either to manage the risk or to realize the opportunity for the business objectives, which then can be reflected in the management system. So, do you need to? Depends what you've got. Would there be some benefit in doing so? I'd expect so, yes.
another interesting question from Saji. We're planning to implement ISO 14001 from Q2 2026 and integrated with our existing ISO 9001 system.
Mhm.
With ISO 14001 2026 expected to be published soon, would it be possible to go directly for certification to the 2026 version, or would you recommend certifying to 2015 first and transitioning later? And assuming the 9001 or is a 2015 version.
Yeah, well, it would have to be because it's not yet been published to the 26. That's an interesting one. If you're looking to integrate 14,001 with the 9001 and you're seeking new certification before the deadline, I would suggest yes, go for the 2015 because it's there, you know what you're looking at, you're already putting those in place. So yes, get new certification because you're looking at Q2. Then when it comes round to the transition, you've got the requirements from 9001 defined in September. You can finalize things then and transition sometime in 2027 or whenever your cycle of audits falls. That would probably be a better approach, and then you've got some building blocks along the way.
Thank you, Greg. That actually made sense to me, who is not technical.
No need to
So,
sound so surprised, Hader.
um, oh, and another interesting question. It's Peter. The direction of travel appears to be increasing alignment between 9 and 14, with environmental aspects creeping into 9. Is there not a risk that organizations will simply abandon 14 in the belief that environmental responsibility is being achieved through 9001 certification?
It's we all have a different lens, don't we? We all have a different perspective, and it's the needs of your organization. Being honest, I do sometimes question why certain organizations seek certification for environmental and safety aspects, certainly in the virtual world we're living in. But it may be a requirement of your customers, and there's needs must there. It's entirely your decision. With any of these management system standards, they're voluntary. From our point of view, there's no requirement, and the move across to the new version of the standard to whether or not you certify to one or multiple standards is entirely your decision.
I agree, but it is definitely good to have the ISOs in place. Now, Graham has a question. We have an integrated VMS of ISO 9, 14, and 45. If we applied these updates to our system to also consider ISO 45001, where potentially applicable, would this help for future updates to 45001? I presume this will be updated at some point to mirror some of the crossover updates of 9 and 14.
Yes, indeed. Maybe one thing I wasn't as clear on initially is the backbone, the Annex SL. A lot of these updates have been applied to that, and that will apply to any future standard changes, including ISO 45001. So if you go ahead and make the changes, you won't not be meeting the previous version of the standard, if that makes sense. And you'll have obviously that integration moving forward. So, yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Again, that is, I think, really useful information and a great question. Question from Alison. The existing internal auditors, will they need to be recertified?
So there's no need for internal auditors to be certified. That's a requirement in the standard. You yourselves as an organization define the competence requirements for the personnel involved in the effectiveness of the QMS. So what will happen there is it's entirely up to yourselves. As I say, if you share the webinar, the information, and say, okay, these are the key points, focus on these as you go forward, you amend your internal procedures, processes, approaches, then that should be sufficient. As I say, there's no requirement in any of the standards that internal audits need to be certified.
Thank you, Greg. Dilip has a question. For existing certificate, we need to again recertification required as per these changes?
So no, it's when you do the transition audit, we'll need to have a look at the areas which are impacted, which have changed to make sure that they've been applied in your management system. Because no additional time is being added, I am fairly certain that we can do that through a surveillance audit as normal, and there will be no impact on your certification cycle.
Okay. I think that is all the questions that we have at the moment, and it's possible we will have more as some people were not able to listen to it. So
No problem.
once we share the presentation, and Craig, do you want to move to the QR code, which I know is part of the
Of course.
recording, so it could potentially people could move or scan then.
Thank you very much. And we have we have the QR code displayed now. And this is for you to link to our existing pages, I think. It's not my area, but you link into the existing information that we have, which will be updated. I think there was a question about checklists and checks and things like that. So that will be updated if you follow that link. And there's also been a poll launched that whether or not you would like a follow-up call for us to talk to you about the changes going forward.
Okay, so Amy, I guess a comment for you. A couple of people would prefer the link directly rather than a QR code. So if we can share a link as well with the presentation and register your interest through the QR code or the link for the supporting literature, which will be published once the standards are published as well. Other than that, thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and some really good questions there.
Yeah, thank you, and have a great rest of the day and a lovely weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.